60% of open source maintainers are unpaid.
Are they directly getting paid? Is it like a Patreon kind of thing? Or is it being paid at work to, like, they're really working on a different project, but they're able to put some time into an open source project? Or do you know?
I think personally that we should publicly fund at least certain open source projects. You probably interact more with open source software than you do with roads.
Well, I'm a little mad at roads right now, but we won't talk about that.
Hello, how the tech are you? My name is HK Perrin, and I'm a software engineer. And this week, I've got an interesting story. 60% of open source maintainers are unpaid. And more shockingly, 40% of them are paid. According to a new report from Tidelift, 60% of open source maintainers describe themselves as unpaid hobbyists. Open source software benefits everyone, and as such, I think it should be publicly funded. You probably interact more with open source software than you do with roads. Both Android and iOS run on open source operating system kernels. Most apps you use rely on open source software libraries, and most services on the internet run on open source software and infrastructure. Basically, the only sectors that don't highly depend on open source software are ones where software has to be certified as conforming to certain regulations. That certification costs money, and a lack of funding means very little open source software is made for those fields. Tidelift's report shows that better funded developers spend more time working on their projects, and that's really not surprising. So, Matt, what do you think?
So I guess my first question is, when you say 40% are getting paid, are they directly getting paid? Is it like a Patreon kind of thing? Or is it being paid at work to, like, they're really working on a different project, but they're able to put some time into an open source project? Or do you know?
So this is based on self-reporting. So I would assume that, the question being like, are you unpaid or paid? I would assume that it means, like, people would interpret it as, are you getting paid by your job to work on this open source software? But, I don't know how people would interpret it, whether they would interpret it as, like, do you have a revenue stream through Patreon, or do you make money through, selling licenses, which you actually can sell, or I guess not licenses, but, like, you can sell open source software. Open source software is, in general, it's free as in beer, but really the idea behind it is that the only thing required is free as in speech, meaning, like, you are, you as the end user are free to get the source code for that project and, build it yourself, adapt it, whether that means that they provide that source code for free on the internet, or they provide that source code only to people who pay a nominal fee for that source code. There is no requirement about that. So you could have an open source project that is open source and follows all the guidelines of being free and open source, but is a paid product, and the only way to get the source code is be a paid customer. Now, you couldn't then restrict someone from redistributing that source code themselves. So, for example, like, if I paid someone for a GPL licensed product, the source code for a GPL licensed product, I could then give that away to someone else, and that's not against the GPL.
Yeah. One caveat there is some open source projects that do, like, make you pay for what they do. They often include, like, images and stuff that are copyrighted, so you're kind of paying for the images. You can redistribute the source code and recompile it, but you have to remove those images first.
Yes. Yeah. So that is a way to. So Firefox, for example, is like this. Firefox is open source, but you cannot distribute Firefox's branding. So you could take the source code and build Firefox yourself and release it publicly, but you can't call it Firefox, and you can't use the Firefox logo or the Mozilla logo. So that's why you get projects like Iceweasel, which Iceweasel is a fork of Firefox without the Firefox branding.
And I mean, that makes sense. That seems like a good compromise. So you still have access to the source code, and if Firefox does stupid stuff, then people can still fork it and fix the dumb stuff.
Yeah, I actually like that model a lot because it allows a company to both provide open source software that they can distribute for free, but also have a remedy if someone else is trying to use that name to prop up their own software. You know, you get to protect your brand, and you also get to protect kind of like the security and trust behind your brand. So, you know, if I'm getting something that's labeled as Firefox, I know that it was built by, you know, either Mozilla or someone who has permission from Mozilla to build and distribute that. But yeah, I think personally that we should publicly fund at least certain open source projects. Certainly the open source projects that are relied on by a lot of the internet and a lot of our, you know, infrastructure. So the things that come to mind are like the Linux kernel, the GNU compiler, and tool set, you know, all the libraries, like even though it's not that widely used, like things like Muscle that are, you know, alternatives to the GNU C libraries, but certainly, you know, the GNU compiler and C libraries and all that project, and things like Mozilla, I think maybe shouldn't be like 100% publicly funded, but because they provide this open source software that makes the internet better, I do think we should have some amount of public funding that is going to them. And maybe we do. I don't know all of how Mozilla gets their money. But I certainly know that there are a lot of projects that are big projects that basically run the internet that don't have a lot of public funding, if any at all.
I would say as a previously as a government contractor back in the day, I can tell you, like, there's a certain amount of it is actually government funded, just because people who are government contractors who use this open source software are contributing back. There's a lot of smart people there. It's usually, you know, people complain about government software, but it's often the government that's the problem, not the software creators. From my experience.
There are also other reasons why this would benefit society as a whole. If you're trying to learn how to write software, open source software is such a valuable resource in that endeavor. When I first started coding, back when I was like, I think I started when I was 10, I would go on like open source, like websites where people would share open source code, and I would use that code to learn from it. You know, take snippets out of that and put it into my code.
I don't think I ever used any open source code to learn stuff. Not sure, but I definitely didn't seek it out for that sort of thing. Because, you know, learning something is, you know, different from, you know, writing an actual project or something, you know, a big product or something like that. I may have looked at open source software to try and figure out how it worked, you know, either to fix a problem or use it in a project of mine, but it wasn't really to learn how to code to begin with. But I just think that, like, open source software, because it's so useful, it's used in so many different places. It's kind of a you know, social commons kind of thing, right? Everybody has access. It's good for everybody. Then it'd be great if the government supported that, because, you know, they probably would get a lot more back out of it than what they spend on it.
I'm sure it would provide a big return on investment.
Yes.
I don't know if it would rival roads. Roads have a pretty huge return on investment, but
true.
Maybe. I don't know. All right.
Well, I'm a little mad at roads right now, but we won't talk about that.
Thank you for watching How the Tech Are You? We do this show every week, and we put it up on YouTube in multiple segments. If you like our show, you can check out our other shows at echoplexmedia.com, and you can support us at eplex.store and patreon.com/echoplex. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and another video for you will be up on the screen somewhere around here. And have a great Tech-in week.